So I've seen that a lot of people have called Joker the best film of the year, and like, yeah, I agree it's good, but best film of the year might be a bit of a stretch. Now, before you click off the video calling me a Marvel fanboy and that I'm never gonna like anything DC, I do like the film, it's just I have some negative opinions towards it, which I will get into, but before I do that, there's something I think I should do first. I tried to do clown makeup, and it didn't go well. Okay, this is the look. For the rest of the video, I'm gonna look like this. I had this big plan that I was gonna look like a Joker, but now, what is this? How is anyone supposed to take my point seriously? Despite my appearance and the face paint, which we won't talk about, I am gonna make some points. First of all, Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker is pretty much perfect, and in my opinion, maybe, possibly, definitely top 3 performances of the year so far. I've seen a few people say that might be the best performance of the decade. I'm not entirely sure about that. I've also seen that people think that he's better than Heath Ledger. That might be because of how like new and fresh this performance is. I also don't agree with that, but I do think that Joaquin Phoenix definitely submerges himself in this role. It's like Joaquin just disappeared and Arthur Fleck is here. I recently watched the film You Were Never Really Here, which also stars Joaquin Phoenix, and like, if you didn't tell me that those two people were the same, they were the same person, I honestly would think they were different people. He is so, I don't want to say like, I don't want to sound like really like pretentious and wanky, but he's so like transformative, if that makes sense. Like he just becomes the character. Like it's just good acting from Mr. Phoenix. You did a I meant to zoom out. You did a good job. Yeah, great job. So in terms of like how the film looks, I think it's pretty much perfect. Gotham feels and looks lived in. Every room, every street just feels like it could be a real place. All the costume design is great. It's sort of like it's set during the 1980s, I think, but it feels like it could be set during like earlier or even today. Like Gotham doesn't feel, it feels timeless is what I'm trying to get at. Like Gotham does feel timeless, which I think works for this film, because something like Avengers Endgame, which has a stamp on it, which has a date on it, might sort of over time lose its touch, whereas with this I feel like you could watch it in like 20 years time, or you could have watched it like 10 years ago and it still would have had the same effects, which I really like, and I really commend, I think that's the right word, I really commend Todd Phillips for making that decision as a director. Right, the soundtrack to this film, a lot of people have been talking about it, complements the film, like cheese in a ham and cheese sandwich. It's just good. It's just good. If you like really intense soundtracks, then go listen to this. I think it's available on Spotify. It also matches the scenery very well. And yes, great soundtrack. Great soundtrack. My next point might be a bit strange, but I promise you it's a positive point. This doesn't feel like a DC film. In fact, it doesn't feel like a Marvel film either. It feels like its own separate entity, and if the Joker wasn't this massive comic book character and this was just the first ever iteration of that character, I think this might be one of the better superhero films that we've gotten. Obviously I don't think it's out there with stuff like the Guardians of the Galaxy films, Spider-Man 2 or The Dark Knight, but I definitely think it's on like that A tier level of superhero films, and I'm glad that Warner Brothers took a risk. I'm glad they took a risk. They actually let someone do something different, something that wasn't connected to this major universe, something that wasn't kid-friendly. They actually went out of their way to make a film about the Joker, like a character study about a man that goes on to be like one of the craziest terrorists in Gotham. That's insane, and I'm very happy they did that. I'm happy for both Joaquin Phoenix, Todd Phillips, and every single other person within this film. They did a really good job with this film. Another thing I really liked about this is that you never really know what's going on, because the Joker, or Arthur Fleck, is such an unreliable narrator, and so key parts of the film might not actually be real. Stuff that has happened you might not know until later on in the film, and I feel like it's just a clever way of making films, and we need more superhero films like this. We need more superhero films that try and take a risk, that try and do something different and a sort of change in the genre. All that being said, like I said earlier, I don't think it's this perfect film that everyone's making out to be, because I've got some negative points. For example, some lines of dialogue made me cringe. There's a whole speech during a scene, I'm not going to spoil it, but if you know the scene in which he goes on to the Murray Franklin show, there is a whole speech that basically, in summary, ends up just saying, we live in a society. Now, oh, the makeup is going down, that's not good. The whole speech is just like, we live in a society, and I literally face-palmed. I was like, you had so much that you could have said, so much about, I don't know, mental health, about the way Gotham is run, but instead this is what happens when the system and it made me cringe. I'm not gonna lie, it made me cringe. Another line that made me cringe was and I think it's in the trailer, but I don't know because I haven't watched the trailers. The call me Joker, can you call me Joker? Now in my mind, right, and maybe it's just me, I always thought that the Joker was a name given to him. You know, like how much Superman was a name given to Clark Kent, how much like Batman, I don't think he calls himself Batman. He might do. I'm not really like with it when it comes to comics. But it's like I always thought that someone should have named him Joker. You know, maybe Murray Franklin is like, up next is everybody's favourite Joker, Arthur Fleck, and then he like takes that name because obviously that scene to me is when the Joker is like, he's here to stay. That's when he solidifies himself as the clown prince of crime, basically. There's also this weird subplot that I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically someone is possibly someone else's dad, but he's also not his dad. And that whole thing, just, no, don't do that, please. Don't do that. It's just, no, that's... you're going too far with that one, I think, in my personal opinion. You are going a bit too far, and like made my eyes roll, not gonna lie. Wasn't a good decision, Todd. But my biggest issue with this film isn't the film itself, it's the idea of the film. We now have, within the mainstream, because you've got to remember, a lot of mainstream audiences will watch this. I know that if you're a comic book fan or even a superhero fan, you know that the Joker's preferred origin story is multiple choice, so there's different things to select from. But with this, now in the mainstream, we have an origin story for a character who, one of the most interesting things about that character was the fact that the origin was a mystery. I don't know why it took me so long to say that, but yeah, it's like one of the most interesting things about Joker was the fact that his origin was a mystery, and now we've got an origin story for him, which is fine, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it, because it was a good film. I don't think it's 10 out of 10. It was a good film, but the idea that we now have like an almost definitive, like it isn't definitive, but you know, if you don't pay attention to what Todd Phillips says, and if you don't pay attention and you're just like an average moviegoer, like you got to think about it. Like say a 40-year-old man who doesn't go on Twitter, doesn't use the internet, has never read a comic book, goes to watch Joker. In that 40-year-old man's head, that's the Joker's origin story, and I don't know how to feel about that. And I feel like the film could have made more choices to sort of allude to the fact that the Joker maybe isn't telling the truth about his origin. Maybe the final scene of the film, and I will talk about the spoilers, should have had not Arthur Fleck in Arkham State Hospital, but Joker like in the costume talking to the woman. I don't know who it was, but talking to the woman, and then he said something at the end like, would you like to hear another version? And then that's like, oh, okay, so there's multiple different things. That's just how I would have done it. So yeah, it's a good film. I recommend it. Solid 4 out of 5 for me. That's my final score. I really enjoyed it. If you've watched it, then let me know in the comments below. If you did watch Joker and thought it was a pretty good film, the two films that I could recommend you watching based off Joker is both A Clockwork Orange and Bronson. They sort of deal with similar themes, but in their own sort of way. And also, they're just really, really good films. That's all I have to say. I'm now going to take off this clown makeup, because at the end of the day, I am a clown, and so are you. So subscribe, because if you don't, then I'll send the clowns to your house.